A single kick can end a fight in seconds. But what happens when that kick lands on someone who isn't allowed to fight back? Marcus Chen was about to learn that some battles aren't won with fists, and some opponents are far more dangerous when they choose restraint over retaliation. The summer heat pressed down on London like a heavy blanket as tourists crowded around Buckingham Palace. Cameras clicked constantly, capturing the stoic guards in their red uniforms and tall, bear-skinned hats. Among the sea of visitors stood Marcus Chen, a 28-year-old martial arts instructor from California who had spent the last decade perfecting his craft. Marcus had built a considerable following on social media by showcasing his skills. His videos demonstrated lightning-fast kicks, powerful strikes, and impressive acrobatic moves that earned him millions of views. He thrived on attention and lived for the moments when crowds gathered to watch him perform. But lately, the views had plateaued, and Marcus felt the pressure to create something bigger, something that would go truly viral. His friend Jake, who was filming on his phone, nudged him as they approached the palace gates. "Dude, this place is insane. Look at all these people." Jake had flown out from San Diego to spend 2 weeks touring Europe with Marcus. Though he was starting to realize this trip was more about content creation than actual sightseeing, Marcus barely acknowledged the comment. His eyes were fixed on the guards standing at attention, rifles at their sides, faces blank and emotionless despite the hundreds of tourists trying to provoke reactions. He had seen videos of people making fools of themselves in front of these guards, getting yelled at or pushed aside when they crossed the line. An idea began forming in his mind, one that made his pulse quicken with excitement. "I need to do something here," Marcus said quietly, his brain already calculating angles and potential footage, something nobody else has done. Jake lowered his phone and looked at his friend with concern. "What do you mean? We're just here to see the palace, right? Take some pictures, grab some fish and chips, all that tourist stuff?" Marcus shook his head, his jaw set with determination. "This is the perfect opportunity. Look at how many people are here. If I do something incredible, something shocking, it'll be everywhere by tonight. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all of it. This could be the breakthrough I need." The crowd around them continued to swell as the afternoon wore on. Families posed for photos while children pointed excitedly at the guards. Street performers juggled nearby, and vendors sold Union Jack souvenirs from small carts. The atmosphere was cheerful and relaxed, with everyone enjoying the sunny day and the pageantry of one of London's most famous landmarks. Marcus pushed through the crowd, getting closer to one of the guards stationed near the main gate. The guard was young, probably in his mid-20s, with a sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes that stared straight ahead. His uniform was immaculate, every button polished, every crease perfect. He stood with such stillness that he might have been a statue if not for the occasional blink. "Jake, start filming," Marcus instructed, his voice low but urgent. "Get everything. Don't stop recording no matter what happens." Jake reluctantly raised his phone again, a bad feeling settling in his stomach. "Marcus, I don't know about this. These guards are military. They're not just for show. Whatever you're thinking, maybe we should just film," Marcus interrupted, already loosening up his shoulders and rolling his neck. He had performed thousands of kicks in his lifetime. His flexibility and speed were exceptional, the result of countless hours of training. He knew exactly what he was going to do, and in his mind, it was already a success. The guard, whose name was Thomas Whitmore, had been standing at his post for nearly an hour. He had trained for this role extensively, learning not just military discipline, but the specific protocols required for ceremonial duties. He knew that tourists would try to distract him, make him laugh, or break his concentration. He had been prepared for almost every scenario, from people making faces to individuals trying to touch his uniform or weapon. What he had not expected was what happened next. Marcus took 3 quick steps forward, planted his left foot firmly on the ground, and launched his right leg up in a perfectly executed spinning hook kick. His foot arced through the air with devastating speed and precision, aimed directly at the guard's face. The crowd gasped collectively, some people screaming in shock as Marcus's boot made contact with the side of Thomas's face, just below his bearskin hat. The impact was solid. Thomas's head snapped to the side, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. The entire courtyard fell silent. Even the street performers stopped their acts. Every eye was fixed on the scene unfolding before them. Marcus landed smoothly, his balance perfect, a triumphant grin already spreading across his face. He turned toward Jake, ready to celebrate the spectacular footage they had just captured. In his mind, he was already composing the caption, "Black Belt takes on Royal Guard." You won't believe what happens next. But Thomas Whitmore did not fall. He did not stumble. He did not even raise his hand to touch the red mark forming on his cheek. Instead, Thomas slowly, deliberately turned his head back to face forward. His expression remained completely neutral. His eyes, however, had changed. There was something in them now, a sharp intelligence and controlled intensity that Marcus had not noticed before. Thomas's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and his fingers flexed once around his rifle, but he made no other movement. For 5 long seconds, nothing happened. The crowd held its breath. Marcus's grin began to fade as confusion replaced his confidence. This was not the reaction he had expected. He had anticipated anger, retaliation, or at least some visible sign of shock. Instead, the guard stood there like a stone pillar, absorbing the assault as if it had been nothing more than a gentle breeze. Then, without warning, Thomas spoke. His voice was calm, clear, and carried easily across the silent courtyard. "Sir, you have just committed an assault on a member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces. You will remain where you are." The words were not shouted. They did not need to be. The authority in Thomas's tone was absolute, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. This was not going according to plan. The crowd began murmuring, some people reaching for their phones to call for help, others backing away as if anticipating what would come next. Marcus looked at Jake, his confidence evaporating. "We should go now." But before either of them could move, 2 things happened simultaneously. First, 3 more guards appeared from nearby positions, moving with surprising speed toward Marcus. Second, the wail of police sirens cut through the air, growing louder by the second. Thomas remained at his post, still at attention, still looking straight ahead. But as the other guards closed in on Marcus, Thomas allowed himself the smallest hint of a smile. It lasted less than a second, but Marcus saw it, and in that moment, he realized the magnitude of his mistake. He had not kicked a mere tourist attraction. He had assaulted a trained soldier who was bound by duty and discipline not to retaliate in kind. And now, he was about to discover that there were consequences far worse than a physical fight. The guards reached Marcus just as the first police car pulled up to the palace gates. One of them, a sergeant with decades of experience written in the lines of his face, spoke firmly. "Put your hands behind your back, sir. You're being detained." Marcus's mouth went dry. "Wait, this is a misunderstanding. I'm a martial artist. I was just demonstrating a technique. It was for a video. I didn't mean any harm." Sergeant's expression did not change. "You kicked a guard in the face, sir? That's assault. The intent does not matter. The action does. Now, hands behind your back, please." Jake stood frozen, his phone still recording, watching as his friend's arms were pulled behind him. Security personnel swarmed the area, and the crowd of tourists was being moved back behind a wider perimeter. Some people continued filming on their phones, capturing Marcus's arrest from every angle. Marcus felt plastic zip ties tighten around his wrists. His heart pounded in his chest, and sweat dripped down his back despite the cooling evening air. This was supposed to be his big moment, his viral breakthrough. Instead, he was being detained in front of hundreds of witnesses, and those witnesses were all recording everything. As the police officers began leading Marcus away toward their vehicle, he looked back at Thomas one last time. The guard had not moved from his position. His face showed no satisfaction, no anger, no emotion whatsoever. He simply stood there, doing his job with the same unwavering commitment he had shown before the attack. But Marcus knew better now. That blank expression was not weakness or passivity. It was iron discipline, the kind of control that Marcus himself had never truly possessed. He had spent years training his body, but Thomas had trained something far more powerful, his mind and his restraint. The police car door slammed shut, and Marcus found himself sitting in the back seat, still zip-tied, still trying to process what had just happened. Jake was being questioned by another officer nearby, his phone confiscated as evidence. The crowd had finally been dispersed, though small groups lingered, discussing the incident in hushed, excited tones. Inside the police station, Marcus was processed with efficient precision. His belongings were catalogued, his passport examined, and his rights read to him in clear, formal English. He was placed in a holding cell, a small gray room, with a metal bench and a toilet in the corner. The reality of his situation was beginning to sink in with crushing weight. Hours passed. Marcus sat on the bench, his head in his hands, replaying the moment over and over in his mind. What had he been thinking? He had let his desperation for attention override his judgment completely. He had assaulted someone who was just doing their job. Someone who had shown more strength in his restraint than Marcus had shown in all his years of martial arts training. The door to the holding cell opened, and a police detective entered. She was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She sat down across from Marcus and opened a folder containing printed screenshots from Jake's video. "Mr. Chen," she began, her accent crisp and professional, "you're in quite a bit of trouble. Assault on a military serviceman, disturbing the peace, and depending on how the Crown Prosecution Service views this, potentially more serious charges. Do you understand the gravity of what you've done?" Marcus nodded miserably. "I do now. I'm sorry. I really am. It was stupid. I was just trying to create content for my social media." "I didn't think that's correct," the detective interrupted. "You didn't think. And now you're facing criminal charges in a foreign country? Your embassy has been notified, but that doesn't mean you're going home anytime soon." The weight of her words pressed down on Marcus like a physical force. He had come to London for adventure and fame. Instead, he had found himself trapped in a nightmare of his own making. All because he had underestimated a man who had stood perfectly still and refused to be provoked. Thomas Whitmore, meanwhile, had finished his shift and been examined by medical personnel. The kick had left a bruise on his cheek and jaw, but nothing was broken. He had given his statement to the military police and was now sitting in the guards' common room, a cup of tea in his hands, surrounded by his fellow soldiers. "You all right, Tommy?" asked one of his friends, a corporal named Davies. Thomas nodded slowly. "I'm fine. Just another day at the palace, I suppose." But it had not been just another day, and Thomas knew it. He had been tested in a way that went beyond the usual tourist antics. In that moment when the kick had connected, every instinct had screamed at him to respond, to defend himself, to strike back. But he had not. He had held his position, maintained his composure, and let the system handle the situation as it was designed to do. That was the real strength, Thomas reflected. Not the ability to fight, but the ability to choose not to when every part of you wanted to. Marcus Chen had demonstrated impressive physical technique, but he had demonstrated nothing else. No judgment, no discipline, no respect. As news of the incident began spreading online, the video was indeed going viral, but not in the way Marcus had hoped. The comments were overwhelmingly critical, calling him foolish, disrespectful, and dangerous. People praised the guard's restraint and condemned Marcus's actions. His social media accounts were flooded with angry messages, and some of his sponsors began distancing themselves from him immediately. Back in the holding cell, Marcus lay on the bench, staring at the ceiling. He had wanted to be famous, to be talked about, to be remembered. Now he would be all those things, but as a cautionary tale, perfect example of what happens when ego and poor judgment collide. The guard's next move, the one Marcus never expected, had not been a punch or a kick. It had been perfect, controlled stillness followed by the full weight of legal consequences. And that, Marcus was learning, was far more powerful than any martial arts technique he had ever mastered. The morning came with harsh, fluorescent lights flickering on in the holding cell. Marcus had barely slept, his mind racing through everything that had happened in the past 12 hours. The metal bench had been unforgiving, and every time he shifted position, his zip-tied wrists reminded him of his predicament. When a guard finally arrived with breakfast, a sad-looking sandwich and lukewarm tea, Marcus could barely stomach it, At 10 o'clock, he was escorted to an interview room where his assigned solicitor was waiting. The lawyer, a middle-aged man named Richard Patterson, looked at Marcus with the weary expression of someone who had seen countless foolish decisions play out in his career. "Mr. Chen," Richard began, spreading papers across the table between them, "I've reviewed your case, and I won't sugarcoat this. You're facing assault charges, and the evidence against you is overwhelming. There's video from multiple angles, dozens of witnesses, and the victim's testimony. The Crown Prosecution Service is taking this seriously because you attacked a member of the armed forces while they were on duty." Marcus swallowed hard. "What's going to happen to me? Can I just apologize and pay a fine or something?" Richard shook his head slowly. "This isn't a parking ticket, Mr. Chen. Assault causing actual bodily harm can carry a sentence of up to 5 years in prison, though first-time offenders typically receive less. The fact that you're a foreign national complicates matters. There's also the question of your visa status and whether you'll be banned from returning to the United Kingdom." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. 5 years, prison, banned from the country. His entire life was unraveling because of one stupid decision, one moment of arrogance and poor judgment. His hands trembled as the full reality crashed down on him. "I need you to be completely honest with me," Richard continued, his tone professional but not unkind. "Was this premeditated? Did you come to the palace specifically intending to attack the guard?" Marcus hesitated, then nodded miserably. "I wanted to create viral content. My social media had been stagnating, and I thought if I did something shocking, something nobody else had done, it would blow up. I'm a martial arts instructor. I've spent my whole life training, and I wanted people to see what I could do." Richard made notes on his legal pad, his pen scratching across the paper. "So you admit you planned this assault ahead of time. That makes it premeditated, which the prosecution will absolutely use against you. Mr. Chen, I have to ask, what were you thinking? Did you not consider that there would be consequences?" The question hung in the air, and Marcus found he had no good answer. The truth was, he had not thought about consequences at all. He had been so focused on views, likes, and comments that he had completely disconnected from reality. The guard had been a prop in his mind, not a real person with feelings, rights, and the full protection of British law behind him. "I wasn't thinking," Marcus admitted quietly. "I just wanted to be famous." Richard closed his folder and looked at Marcus directly. "Well, you've got your wish. Your video has been viewed over 20 million times in the past 12 hours. News outlets around the world are covering this story. You're famous, Mr. Chen, but for all the wrong reasons." Those words stung more than Marcus expected. He had dreamed of fame his entire adult life, worked tirelessly to build his skills and his online presence. Now he had achieved it, and it felt like poison. Meanwhile, across London, Thomas Whitmore was sitting in his small apartment, scrolling through his phone. The bruise on his face had darkened overnight, a purple and yellow mark that made his jaw ache when he moved it. His commanding officer had given him the day off to rest, though Thomas felt oddly restless. The incident kept replaying in his mind, not the kick itself, but the moment after, when he had made the choice to remain still. His girlfriend, Emma, sat beside him on the couch, her hand resting on his knee. "You should be proud of yourself," she said softly. "Everyone's talking about how professional you were. You could have hit him back and nobody would have blamed you, but you didn't. That takes real strength." Thomas set his phone down and sighed. "I don't feel particularly strong. I feel like I was just doing my job. That's what we're trained for. Discipline, restraint, composure under pressure. It's not heroic. It's just what we do." Emma squeezed his knee gently. "Maybe that's what makes it heroic. You didn't choose the easy path. You chose the right one." The conversation was interrupted by a phone call from Thomas's commanding officer, Major Harrison. Thomas answered immediately, sitting up straighter out of habit, even though the major could not see him. "Whitmore, how are you feeling?" the major asked, his voice gruff but concerned. I'm fine, sir. Just a bit sore. Nothing serious." "Good, listen. I'm calling because there's been a development. The American Embassy has been in contact with the Foreign Office. They're trying to negotiate on behalf of Mr. Chen, see if there's any way to minimize the diplomatic fallout from this incident. The prosecution is moving forward, but there's going to be pressure to reach some kind of resolution quickly. Thomas felt a complicated mix of emotions. Part of him wanted Marcus to face the full consequences of his actions. But another part, the part that had chosen restraint in that crucial moment, wondered if there might be a better outcome than simply throwing someone in prison. "What does that mean for me, sir?" Thomas asked. "It means you'll likely be asked to give your input on sentencing recommendations. The prosecution will want to know if you feel the assault warrants maximum penalties or if you'd support alternative measures. It's entirely your decision, Whitmore. You're the victim here. Whatever you choose, the regiment supports you." After the call ended, Thomas sat in silence for a long moment. Emma watched him, recognizing the thoughtful expression he wore when wrestling with difficult decisions. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking about what kind of man I want to be," Thomas said slowly. "And what kind of outcome actually serves justice?" 2 days later, Marcus appeared in magistrate's court for his first hearing. The courtroom was small and crowded, with journalists squeezed into the public gallery alongside curious onlookers. Jake had been released after giving his statement and surrendering his footage, but he sat in the back, his face pale and drawn, watching his friend face the consequences of their failed adventure. The magistrate, a stern woman in her 60s, named Judge Margaret Thornton, reviewed the case file with meticulous attention. She listened to the prosecution's summary of events, watched the video evidence, and read the witness statements. When she finally looked up at Marcus, her expression was unreadable. "Mr. Chen," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. "You have been charged with assault causing actual bodily harm. This is a serious offense. It's made more serious by the fact that your victim was a serving member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces performing ceremonial duties. Do you understand the charges against you?" Marcus stood, his legs shaking slightly. "Yes, Your Honor. And how do you plead to these charges?" Richard had coached him extensively on this moment. There was no point in fighting the evidence. The only path forward was to accept responsibility and hope for leniency. "Guilty, Your Honor." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Thornton made a note in her papers, then looked back at Marcus. "A guilty plea this early will be taken into consideration when determining your sentence. However, I want to make something very clear to you, Mr. Chen. This court does not take assaults on military personnel lightly. Your actions were not a harmless prank or an innocent mistake. You deliberately attacked someone who was bound by duty and protocol not to defend themselves. You exploited their position for your own vanity and gain. That demonstrates a profound lack of judgment and respect." Each word landed like a hammer blow. Marcus felt his face burning with shame. Every eye in the courtroom was on him, and he knew that somewhere cameras were recording this for posterity. His moment of fame had become a public humiliation, broadcast for the world to see. Judge Thornton continued. "Before I proceed with sentencing, I want to hear from the victim. Guardsman Thomas Whitmore has submitted a victim impact statement, and he has asked to read it personally. Guardsman Whitmore, please approach." Marcus's head snapped up in surprise. He had not expected to see Thomas again, certainly not in court. But there he was, walking to the front of the courtroom in his civilian clothes, the bruise still visible on his face. Thomas took the stand, and when he looked at Marcus, his expression was calm but serious. Thomas unfolded a piece of paper and began to read. "Your Honor, members of the court, when Mr. Chen kicked me in the face, my first instinct was to retaliate. I'm trained in combat. I could have struck back and been within my rights to do so. But I'm also trained in something more important: discipline, self-control, the understanding that true strength isn't about what you can do to someone else. It's about what you can stop yourself from doing." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the journalists had stopped scribbling in their notebooks, captivated by Thomas's words. Mr. Chen demonstrated impressive physical ability. His technique was good. His speed and precision were clearly the result of years of training, but he demonstrated no wisdom, no respect, no consideration for the consequences of his actions. He saw me as an object, a prop for his entertainment. not as a person with dignity and rights. Marcus felt tears stinging his eyes. Hearing Thomas speak, hearing the calm analysis of his failure, was somehow worse than any angry accusation could have been. However, Thomas continued, and the word hung in the air, "I don't believe that sending Mr. Chen to prison serves anyone's interests. He made a terrible mistake, and he needs to face consequences. But I think there's an opportunity here for something more constructive than simple punishment." Judge Thornton leaned forward with interest. "Go on, guardsman. Mr. Chen is a martial arts instructor. He teaches young people. He has influence over students who look up to him. If he goes to prison, that's the end of the story. He becomes another cautionary tale, and nothing really changes. But if he takes responsibility in a more meaningful way, if he uses his platform and his experience to teach others about respect, discipline, and the consequences of poor judgment, then maybe something good can come from this incident." Thomas folded his paper and looked directly at Marcus. "I want him to understand what he did wrong, not just legally, but morally. And I want him to help others understand it too. That, I believe, would be real justice." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Thornton called for order, then took a long moment to consider Thomas's statement. Marcus stood there, stunned. He had expected anger, demands for maximum punishment, perhaps even personal testimony about the pain and humiliation of being attacked in front of hundreds of people. Instead, Thomas had offered something he did not deserve, mercy tempered with accountability. Judge Thornton finally spoke. "Guardsman Whitmore, your statement demonstrates remarkable maturity and wisdom. The court will take your views into serious consideration, Mr. Chen. You should understand how fortunate you are to have someone like Guardsman Whitmore as your victim. Many people would not be so generous." She paused, reviewing her notes one more time. "This court will adjourn for 1 week while I consider an appropriate sentence, Mr. Chen. You will remain in custody until that time. I suggest you spend that week thinking very carefully about what Guardsman Whitmore has said." Dismissed. As the guards led Marcus away, he looked back at Thomas one last time. Their eyes met across the courtroom, and in that moment, Marcus understood something fundamental. Thomas Whitmore had defeated him more thoroughly than any physical retaliation ever could have. He had done it with words, with grace, and with a level of character that Marcus had never even aspired to. That night, back in his cell, Marcus lay awake thinking about everything Thomas had said. He had spent his entire life focused on external strength, at what his body could do, on impressive techniques and flashy demonstrations. But he had neglected the internal work, the development of judgment, wisdom, and genuine respect for others. Thomas had shown him what real martial arts were supposed to be about. Not violence or showing off, but discipline, control, and the wisdom to know when not to fight. It was a lesson Marcus had somehow missed in all his years of training, and it had taken a humiliating arrest and a gracious victim to teach it to him. For the first time since arriving in London, Marcus felt something other than self-pity or fear. He felt the beginning of genuine remorse, and with it, a desire to become the kind of person who deserved the mercy Thomas had offered. Whether the court would give him that opportunity remained to be seen. But Marcus knew one thing with certainty: if he got a second chance, he would not waste it. The week in custody gave Marcus more time to think than he had experienced in years. Without his phone, without social media, without the constant validation of likes and comments, he was forced to confront who he had become. The silence was uncomfortable at first, almost painful. But gradually, in that quiet space, something shifted inside him. He spent hours replaying his life, examining the choices that had led him to this cell. He remembered when he first started martial arts at age 12, how his instructor had talked about discipline, respect, and using skills only for protection, never aggression. He remembered feeling inspired by those principles, wanting to embody them. But somewhere along the way, between competitions and demonstrations and building his social media following, those principles had faded into background noise. The validation from strangers online had become addictive. Every viral video fed his ego a little more, and each time the views started declining, he felt a desperate need to top his previous content. He had stopped asking whether something was right or wise, and started only asking whether it would get attention. The algorithm had become his moral compass, and it had led him catastrophically astray. On the 5th day of his week in custody, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Richard Patterson, his solicitor, entered the meeting room with someone Marcus had not anticipated seeing again. Thomas Whitmore walked in behind Richard, dressed in casual clothes, the bruise on his face now faded to a yellowish shadow. Marcus stood up immediately, his heart pounding. "Guardsman Whitmore, I don't know what to say." Thomas gestured for Marcus to sit back down, then took the seat across from him. Richard remained standing by the door, giving them space, but staying present as required by protocol. "I asked to speak with you," Thomas began, his voice calm and measured. "I wanted to understand something before your sentencing. I've watched some of your other videos. You're genuinely talented. You've trained hard for years. So I need to know what happened. What made you think kicking a stranger in the face for internet views was acceptable?" The question was not hostile, just genuinely curious. Marcus found himself unable to maintain eye contact. He looked down at his hands, clenched together on the table. "I got lost," Marcus said quietly. "I started martial arts because I loved it. The discipline, the challenge, the way it made me feel strong and capable. But then social media happened, and suddenly I had this audience, these thousands of people watching me. And the more attention I got, the more I needed it. It became about the views, not the art. And when the views started dropping, I panicked." He looked up at Thomas, his eyes red-rimmed. "I saw you standing there, and I didn't see a person. I saw an opportunity. A way to create content that would shock people, that would get shared everywhere. I dehumanized you completely, turned you into a prop for my stunt, and I'm so deeply ashamed of that. There's no excuse for it." Thomas studied Marcus's face for a long moment, as if trying to gauge the sincerity of his words. "Do you understand why I didn't hit you back?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I think I'm starting to. At first I thought maybe you couldn't, like it was against the rules. But that's not really it, is it? You could have defended yourself. You chose not to. I chose not to because retaliation would have made the situation worse," Thomas explained. "It would have escalated violence, probably gotten me in trouble, ultimately achieved nothing except satisfying my anger in the moment. Real strength is choosing the harder path, the one that requires more self-control. That's what discipline actually means." The words resonated deep in Marcus's chest. He had spent years claiming to be disciplined, using the word in his video descriptions and social media profiles. But Thomas had shown him what genuine discipline looked like, and Marcus realized he had only been playing at it, performing a shallow version of something much more profound. "I want to learn that," Marcus said, surprised by the conviction in his own voice. "I don't mean just to avoid punishment. I mean, I actually want to become the kind of person who makes the right choice, not just the easy one, or the one that gets attention." Thomas leaned back in his chair, considering this. "If the judge gives you an alternative to prison, what would you do with it?" Marcus had been thinking about this constantly since Thomas's statement in court. "I'd want to teach. Not just martial arts techniques, but the principles behind them. Real ones, not the watered-down version I've been selling. I'd want to talk to young people about social media, about how it can warp your judgment if you let it. About respect and consequences, and why seeking attention can be so dangerous." "That sounds good," Thomas said carefully, "but talk is easy. Especially for someone who's built a career on creating content. How do I know this isn't just another performance, another thing you're saying because you think it's what people want to hear?" It was a fair question, and Marcus knew his answer would be scrutinized carefully. "You don't know that," he admitted. "I can't prove my sincerity with words. The only way to prove it is through consistent actions over time. If I get the chance, I'll have to show you and everyone else that I mean what I say. I understand you have no reason to trust me, and I'll have to earn that trust back." Thomas nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Marcus, I hope you get the opportunity to make good on what you've said. But I also hope you understand that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are severe. Whatever happens, use this experience. Don't waste it." After Thomas left, Marcus sat alone with Richard, processing the conversation. His solicitor looked at him with new assessment. That was important, Richard said. If your remorse is genuine, the judge will likely be more lenient. But understand that any alternative sentence will come with strict conditions. Community service, public speaking obligations, regular check-ins with probation officers. Your life will be supervised for a significant period. Can you commit to that? Yes, Marcus said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. The day of sentencing arrived with autumn rain pattering against the courthouse windows. Marcus had been awake since before dawn, his stomach churning with anxiety. He had been given a fresh set of clothes for the hearing and had done his best to look presentable, though the week in custody had left him gaunt and hollow-eyed. The courtroom was packed again, even more crowded than the first hearing. News of Thomas's victim impact statement had spread, and people were curious to see how the case would resolve. Marcus could feel hundreds of eyes on him as he stood before Judge Thornton. The judge entered, and everyone rose. When she sat, she immediately began speaking, her voice carrying authority that silenced even the whisper of papers. Mr. Chen, I have spent considerable time reviewing your case, reading statements from both you and Guardsman Whitmore, and considering what outcome serves justice most effectively. This has not been an easy decision. Marcus's hands trembled. His entire future hung on the next few minutes. Your actions were reprehensible, Judge Thornton continued, her gaze fixed on Marcus. You committed a premeditated assault on a person who was unable to defend themselves without facing professional consequences. You did this purely for personal gain, seeking attention and validation at another person's expense. This behavior demonstrates selfishness, poor judgment, and a fundamental lack of respect for others. Each word felt like a blow, but Marcus forced himself to stand straight and accept them. He deserved this criticism and more. However, the judge said, and Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Guardsman Whitmore has advocated for an alternative approach, and his wishes carry significant weight in this court. He believes, and I am inclined to agree, that there may be more value in rehabilitation and education than in incarceration alone. She paused, reviewing her notes. Therefore, I am sentencing you as follows. You will serve 2 months in prison, time already served to count toward this sentence, meaning you have approximately 3 weeks remaining. Following your release, you will complete 300 hours of community service, specifically working with youth organizations, teaching conflict resolution, and the responsible use of social media. Marcus felt his knees weaken with relief, but Judge Thornton was not finished. Additionally, you will be required to create and deliver a series of educational presentations about your experience, the consequences of seeking viral fame, and the importance of respect and discipline. These presentations will be delivered to schools, martial arts organizations, and community groups. You will do this work unpaid, and it will be supervised by the probation service. You will also be banned from posting on social media platforms for a period of 2 years, except for educational content approved by your probation officer. The social media ban hit Marcus harder than he expected. 2 years without posting felt like an eternity, but he recognized it was necessary. He needed to break his addiction to validation to relearn who he was without the constant feedback loop of likes and comments. Furthermore, Judge Thornton added, you will be required to issue a formal public apology to Guardsman Whitmore, the British Armed Forces, and the people of the United Kingdom. This apology will be recorded and published through official channels. Finally, you will be banned from entering the United Kingdom for 10 years following the completion of your sentence. Do you understand these terms? Marcus nodded vigorously. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. I understand completely, and I accept all conditions. See that you do, Mr. Chen. This is an extraordinary second chance. It's granted primarily because of the grace and wisdom shown by your victim. Do not squander it. If you violate any conditions of your sentence, you will serve the full 5 years I could have imposed today. Court is adjourned. As Marcus was led away to serve his remaining weeks, he looked toward the public gallery and saw Thomas sitting there. Their eyes met, and Thomas gave a small nod. It was not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. A recognition that Marcus had been given an opportunity, and what he did with it would define who he truly was. The remaining 3 weeks in prison were different from the first week. Marcus used the time constructively, reading books on philosophy and ethics that the prison library provided. He started writing extensively, documenting his thoughts and experiences, trying to understand how he had lost his way so completely. He also began planning the educational content he would create, determined to make it meaningful rather than performative. When his release day finally came, Marcus walked out of the prison into crisp autumn air. Jake was waiting for him, looking older and more serious than Marcus remembered. "Ready to go home?" Jake asked, embracing his friend. 6 months into his sentence, Marcus received a message through his probation officer. Thomas Whitmore had requested to meet with him again. Marcus's heart raced as he prepared for the meeting, uncertain what to expect but knowing this conversation would be significant. They met at a small cafe in central London, far from the tourist crowds and the palace where everything had begun. Thomas arrived in civilian clothes, looking relaxed and approachable. The bruise had long since faded, leaving no visible trace of the assault that had changed both their lives. "Thank you for meeting me," Marcus said as they sat down with their coffees. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me again." Thomas smiled slightly. "I've been following your progress through the probation reports. Your supervisors say you've been exemplary, that you're genuinely committed to the work. I wanted to see for myself." I am committed," Marcus said earnestly. "This whole experience, as terrible as it was, has been the best thing that ever happened to me. That sounds crazy, I know, but it's true. I was heading toward a really dark place, and I didn't even realize it. You stopped me, not by hitting me back, but by showing me what real strength looks like." Thomas considered this, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "I've thought a lot about that day too, about the choice I made and what it means. I was trained to show restraint, but training only takes you so far. In that moment, I had to choose who I wanted to be. And I realized that the person I wanted to be was someone who broke cycles of violence, rather than perpetuating them." "You broke more than that," Marcus said quietly. "You broke through my entire worldview. I thought power was about what you could do to someone else. You showed me it's about what you can stop yourself from doing." They talked for over an hour, discussing philosophy, martial arts, social media culture, and the nature of discipline. Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying the conversation, not as content to be captured or a story to be told, but as a real human connection with someone he respected deeply. As they prepared to leave, Thomas handed Marcus a business card. "I teach self-defense classes to young people in my spare time. It's volunteer work, teaching kids from rough neighborhoods how to protect themselves and develop confidence. I could use an assistant instructor, someone who understands both the physical techniques and the psychological pitfalls. Would you be interested?" Marcus stared at the card, emotion welling up in his chest. "You'd trust me to work with kids? After everything I did?" "People can change," Thomas said simply. "I believe you have, and I think having you there, sharing your experience about where discipline went wrong and how you're rebuilding it, would be valuable for the students. They need to hear from someone who's made mistakes and is genuinely working to become better." Marcus accepted the card with trembling hands. "I'd be honored. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't deserve it." "Earning it now," Thomas replied. "That's what matters." Working with Thomas's self-defense program became the highlight of Marcus's week. The classes met twice a week in a community center in Brixton, serving teenagers from 14 to 18. Many of them came from challenging backgrounds, dealing with gang pressure, bullying, or family instability. They needed practical skills for protection. But they also needed role models who understood how easy it was to make destructive choices. Marcus found himself connecting with these young people in ways he never had with his social media followers. There were no cameras, no performance, just honest teaching and real relationships. He taught them kicks and strikes. But he also taught them about de-escalation, about knowing when to walk away, about the difference between confidence and arrogance. One student in particular, a 16-year-old named Devin, reminded Marcus of himself at that age. Devin was talented, passionate about martial arts, and already building a following on social media with training videos. But Marcus could see the same dangerous patterns developing, the same addiction to validation he had experienced. After class one evening, Marcus pulled Devin aside. "Can we talk for a minute?" Devin nodded, curious. "Sure, what's up?" Marcus gestured to a bench outside the community center. "I've been watching your social media. You're good, really good. But I see something in your approach that worries me because I've been exactly where you are." Devin looked defensive. "What do you mean? I'm just sharing my training. People like it." "I know they do," Marcus said gently. "And there's nothing wrong with sharing your journey, but I want you to be careful about why you're training and who you're training for. Are you doing it because you love martial arts or because you love the attention? Because those are two very different motivations, and one of them is dangerous." Devin was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Is it true what Mr. Whitmore said? That you kicked a royal guard in the face and got arrested?" Marcus nodded, feeling no shame now, only the weight of truth. "It's true. I let my need for attention override everything else, including basic human decency and respect. I hurt someone who didn't deserve it, all because I wanted my video to go viral. And it did go viral, just not the way I wanted. But you're okay now, right? I mean, you seem like you've got it together." "I'm better than I was," Marcus said carefully. "But it's a daily choice. Every day I have to remember what matters and what doesn't. Views don't matter. Likes don't matter. Being a good person, helping others, using your skills responsibly, that's what matters. And it took losing everything for me to figure that out." Devin absorbed this, staring at his shoes. "Sometimes I check my follower count like 20 times a day. Is that bad?" Marcus smiled sadly, recognizing his former self so clearly. "It's not bad. It's just a warning sign. Social media can be a tool, but it can also be a trap. Just promise me you'll keep asking yourself why you're posting, what you're trying to prove, and whether the attention is changing how you treat people. Stay self-aware, okay?" "Okay," Devin said, looking up at Marcus with new understanding. "Thanks for being real with me." As the months passed, Marcus completed his community service hours and delivered his required presentations. His final presentation was scheduled at a large martial arts conference in Birmingham, where instructors from across the UK would gather. Marcus had been preparing for weeks, knowing this would be the culmination of his sentence and a defining moment in his rehabilitation. Thomas attended the presentation. Sitting in the back of the auditorium with Emma, Marcus spotted them as he took the stage, and their presence gave him strength. He had prepared slides, but instead of using them, he decided to speak from the heart. "My name is Marcus Chen," he began, his voice steady and clear. "A year ago, I committed an assault on a British Royal Guard named Thomas Whitmore. I did it because I wanted to create viral content, because I was addicted to attention, and because I had lost sight of everything martial arts is supposed to represent." The audience was silent, attentive. Marcus continued, telling his story with complete honesty. He described his journey from passionate student to social media performer, the gradual erosion of his principles, the moment of assault, his arrest, and the long process of understanding what he had done wrong. "Guardsman Whitmore could have hit me back," Marcus said, emotion entering his voice. "He was trained to. He was probably justified legally too, but he didn't. He chose discipline over retaliation, and in doing so, he taught me more about martial arts than I had learned in 15 years of training. Real strength isn't about dominating others. It's about controlling yourself." He paused, scanning the audience of martial arts instructors. "Many of you teach children and teenagers. You're shaping not just their physical skills, but their character. I'm asking you to emphasize the principles, not just the techniques. Teach them respect, discipline, and responsibility. Teach them that martial arts is about becoming a better person, not about showing off or seeking glory. Because if you don't, they might end up like I did, learning those lessons the hard way." 6 months into his sentence, Marcus received a message through his probation officer. Thomas Whitmore had requested to meet with him again. Marcus's heart raced as he prepared for the meeting, uncertain what to expect but knowing this conversation would be significant. They met at a small cafe in central London, far from the tourist crowds and the palace where everything had begun. Thomas arrived in civilian clothes, looking relaxed and approachable. The bruise had long since faded, leaving no visible trace of the assault that had changed both their lives. "Thank you for meeting me," Marcus said, as they sat down with their coffees. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me again." Thomas smiled slightly. "I've been following your progress through the probation reports. Your supervisors say you've been exemplary, that you're genuinely committed to the work. I wanted to see for myself." I am committed," Marcus said earnestly. "This whole experience, as terrible as it was, has been the best thing that ever happened to me. That sounds crazy, I know, but it's true. I was heading toward a really dark place, and I didn't even realize it. You stopped me, not by hitting me back, but by showing me what real strength looks like." Thomas considered this, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "I've thought a lot about that day, too. About the choice I made and what it means. I was trained to show restraint, but training only takes you so far. In that moment, I had to choose who I wanted to be. And I realized that the person I wanted to be was someone who broke cycles of violence rather than perpetuating them." "You broke more than that," Marcus said quietly. "You broke through my entire worldview. I thought power was about what you could do to someone else. You showed me it's about what you can stop yourself from doing." They talked for over an hour, discussing philosophy, martial arts, social media culture, and the nature of discipline. Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying the conversation, not as content to be captured or a story to be told, but as a real human connection with someone he respected deeply. As they prepared to leave, Thomas handed Marcus a business card. "I teach self-defense classes to young people in my spare time. It's volunteer work, teaching kids from rough neighborhoods how to protect themselves and develop confidence. I could use an assistant instructor, someone who understands both the physical techniques and the psychological pitfalls. Would you be interested?" Marcus stared at the card, emotion welling up in his chest. "You'd trust me to work with kids? After everything I did?" "People can change," Thomas said simply. "I believe you have. And I think having you there, sharing your experience about where discipline went wrong and how you're rebuilding it, would be valuable for the students. They need to hear from someone who's made mistakes and is genuinely working to become better." Marcus accepted the card with trembling hands. "I'd be honored. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't deserve it. You're earning it now," Thomas replied. "That's what matters." Working with Thomas's self-defense program became the highlight of Marcus's week. The classes met twice a week in a community center in Brixton, serving teenagers from 14 to 18. Many of them came from challenging backgrounds, dealing with gang pressure, bullying, or family instability. They needed practical skills for protection. But they also needed role models who understood how easy it was to make destructive choices. Marcus found himself connecting with these young people in ways he never had with his social media followers. There were no cameras, no performance, just honest teaching and real relationships. He taught them kicks and strikes, but he also taught them about de-escalation, about knowing when to walk away, about the difference between confidence and arrogance. One student in particular, a 16-year-old named Devin, reminded Marcus of himself at that age. Devin was talented, passionate about martial arts, and already building a following on social media with training videos. But Marcus could see the same dangerous patterns developing, the same addiction to validation he had experienced. After class one evening, Marcus pulled Devin aside. "Can we talk for a minute?" Devin nodded, curious. "Sure, what's up?" Marcus gestured to a bench outside the community center. "I've been watching your social media. You're good, really good. But I see something in your approach that worries me because I've been exactly where you are." Devin looked defensive. "What do you mean?" "I'm just sharing my training. People like it." "I know they do," Marcus said gently. "And there's nothing wrong with sharing your journey. But I want you to be careful about why you're training and who you're training for. Are you doing it because you love martial arts or because you love the attention? Because those are two very different motivations, and one of them is dangerous." Devin was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Is it true what Mr. Whitmore said? That you kicked a royal guard in the face and got arrested?" Marcus nodded, feeling no shame now, only the weight of truth. "It's true. I let my need for attention override everything else, including basic human decency and respect. I hurt someone who didn't deserve it, all because I wanted my video to go viral. And it did go viral, just not the way I wanted. But you're okay now, right? I mean, you seem like you've got it together. I'm better than I was, Marcus said carefully. But it's a daily choice. Every day I have to remember what matters and what doesn't. Views don't matter. Likes don't matter. Being a good person, helping others, using your skills responsibly, that's what matters. And it took losing everything for me to figure that out. Devin absorbed this, staring at his shoes. Sometimes I check my follower count like 20 times a day. Is that bad? Marcus smiled sadly, recognizing his former self so clearly. It's not bad. It's just a warning sign. Social media can be a tool, but it can also be a trap. Just promise me you'll keep asking yourself why you're posting, what you're trying to prove, and whether the attention is changing how you treat people. Stay self-aware, okay? Okay, Devin said, looking up at Marcus with new understanding. Thanks for being real with me. As the months passed, Marcus completed his community service hours and delivered his required presentations. His final presentation was scheduled at a large martial arts conference in Birmingham, where instructors from across the UK would gather. Marcus had been preparing for weeks, knowing this would be the culmination of his sentence and a defining moment in his rehabilitation. Thomas attended the presentation, sitting in the back of the auditorium with Emma. Marcus spotted them as he took the stage, and their presence gave him strength. He had prepared slides, but instead of using them, he decided to speak from the heart. My name is Marcus Chen, he began, his voice steady and clear. A year ago, I committed an assault on a British Royal Guard named Thomas Whitmore. I did it because I wanted to create viral content, because I was addicted to attention, and because I had lost sight of everything martial arts is supposed to represent. The audience was silent, attentive. Marcus continued, telling his story with complete honesty. He described his journey from passionate student to social media performer. The gradual erosion of his principles, the moment of assault, his arrest, and the long process of understanding what he had done wrong. Guardsman Whitmore could have hit me back, Marcus said, emotion entering his voice. He was trained to. He was probably justified legally too. But he didn't. He chose discipline over retaliation, and in doing so, he taught me more about martial arts than I had learned in 15 years of training. Real strength isn't about dominating others. It's about controlling yourself. He paused, scanning the audience of martial arts instructors. Many of you teach children and teenagers. You're shaping not just their physical skills, but their character. I'm asking you to emphasize the principles, not just the techniques. Teach them respect, discipline, and responsibility. Teach them that martial arts is about becoming a better person, not about showing off or seeking glory. Because if you don't, they might end up like I did, learning those lessons the hard way. When Marcus finished speaking, the applause was thunderous. Several instructors approached him afterward, asking questions and sharing their own concerns about social media's impact on martial arts culture. Many wanted to incorporate his message into their own teaching. Thomas and Emma found Marcus as the crowd dispersed. That was powerful, Thomas said, shaking Marcus's hand firmly. You've come a long way. I had a good teacher, Marcus replied, meaning it completely. Emma smiled warmly. What will you do now? Will you return to America? Marcus had been thinking about this constantly. His sentence was nearly complete. His ban from social media would end eventually, and he could rebuild his life in California. But something had changed fundamentally inside him. I'm going to stay in London for a while longer, he said. I've been offered a position at the youth center, teaching martial arts and life skills to at-risk teenagers. It doesn't pay much, but it feels like the right work. The work I should have been doing all along. Thomas looked pleased. That's excellent. The program could really use someone with your experience and your story. Those kids need to see that change is possible, that mistakes don't have to define you. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same youth center where he had completed his community service, but now as a full-time employee. The room was filled with teenagers learning self-defense, practicing kicks and blocks under his supervision. Devin was there, helping demonstrate techniques for the newer students. Thomas still co-taught the classes, and their partnership had developed into genuine friendship. They pushed each other to be better instructors, better role models, and better men. The students benefited from seeing two people who respected each other deeply, who would overcome a terrible incident through discipline, forgiveness, and mutual growth. During a water break, Marcus watched his students laughing and encouraging each other. Several of them had told him he was the first adult who really understood the pressure they felt from social media. The first person who didn't dismiss their struggles as trivial. He was making a real difference in their lives, not through viral videos or impressive demonstrations, but through consistent presence and authentic mentorship. His phone buzzed with a notification. His social media ban had officially ended that day, and several platforms had sent messages about reactivating his accounts. Marcus looked at the notifications for a long moment, then turned his phone off and slipped it back into his pocket. He would deal with that later, maybe never. Right now, he had actual work to do, real relationships to nurture, genuine impact to make. Thomas noticed the gesture and smiled. Not interested in going back online? Marcus shrugged. I spent years building followers, and they disappeared the moment I wasn't entertaining anymore. These kids, though, they stick around even when class is hard or boring. They show up because they trust me, because the relationship is real. That's worth more than any number of views. You've learned well, Thomas said, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. Martial arts isn't about the flash or the spectacle. It's about discipline, character, and using your strength to protect and serve others. You understand that now. I do, Marcus agreed, and I have you to thank for it. You could have ended me that day at the palace. Instead, you showed me a better path. You defeated me more completely than any physical response could have, and then you helped me rebuild into someone worth knowing. Thomas shook his head modestly. I just made a choice in a difficult moment. You did the real work, Marcus. You took responsibility, put in the effort, and genuinely changed. That was all you. As the class resumed, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace he had never experienced during his social media fame. He was no longer performing for an invisible audience, no longer chasing metrics and validation. He was simply present, doing meaningful work, helping young people avoid the mistakes he had made. In the evenings, he would sometimes think back to that moment at Buckingham Palace, to the kick that had seemed so important at the time. It had been a turning point, but not in the way he had imagined. He had wanted to demonstrate his physical prowess to the world. Instead, Thomas had demonstrated something far more impressive: moral strength, strength under pressure, and the wisdom to choose justice over revenge. That single moment of discipline, Thomas's choice not to retaliate, had set in motion a chain of events that saved Marcus's life. Not from physical danger, but from the spiritual emptiness of chasing fame without substance. From a life spent performing rather than living, Marcus Chen had traveled to London seeking viral fame and had found something infinitely more valuable: purpose, redemption, and the true meaning of discipline. The guard's next move, the one he never expected, had not been a counterattack, but an act of grace that changed everything. And in the end, that made all the difference.